All right, how does this work? It's my first one.
The same here. Not even sure if I need to check on LinkedIn if we're live. Yes, okay, let me check. Oh, yes, we're live on LinkedIn.
Okay. All right.
Great to see how many people are here.
Let's imagine
Oh,
it's a
11. Okay.
it's a coliseum of packed with organic people. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Kwame.
I'm
And
Hugo.
Kwame and Hugo, live from the Synthetic Users HQ. Hugo, do you want to kickstart this? We're going to, just to set your expectations, we're going to talk a little bit about why we're doing this, a little bit about our journey, very succinctly, just so we give you a little bit more context that we are real, in spite of creating all this synthetic reality. And then we're going to dive into the demo. Hugo is going to lead that. We're going to talk a little bit throughout the whole journey today. We're going to talk a little bit about the science behind this. And, last but not least, what we really want is to hear from you guys. So ask us anything. That's what we're here for, really. So let's kick it off. Hugo, why did we start this?
So long story short, we started this because research is harder than it should be. There's countless products that are launched with near zero or literally zero research. There's products that are launched with research that is done kind of as a checkbox exercise, which is a common criticism that we also get from a lot of people, which is, hey, synthetic users now, it's just they can say they did research. That's not our goal at all. Our goal is to provide both big companies who can't afford to spend long cycles of research to launch products, and smaller companies and even individuals who think of they have an idea of something that they can build for the world, but they should have enough information to make an informed decision of what features to include, of is the problem they're trying to solve really worth trying to solve, or is something that people can go along with. So we built this to make better products, essentially to reduce the waste that exists right now in the world in terms of product development. There's huge amount of effort invested in building stuff nobody wants, building stuff that people want but with the wrong features, and we want to help reduce that.
Yeah, I think that's really a meaningful point, because we talk a good game about becoming a little bit more carbon efficient here and there, becoming much more planet centric, but at the end of the day, the inefficiencies that derive from bad decision making, because we just didn't have the data, I think far outweigh a lot of this, these shenanigans. We are, both Hugo and I are completely passionate about product. We've been doing product for many years, and it's in this context of how can we save time, how can we move forward with a little bit more assurance that we are on the right track, that we've started this. And because we are passionate about products, I think there is nothing like a good demo. Hugo, you wouldn't disagree?
Before, no, I you know me, I love to demo. I think that's what the product does should speak for itself. At the same time, I think some background on both of us and how we met.
Fair enough.
Is worth sharing with the people who are watching this. So first of all, I don't know if you know this, Kwame, but it's our 10th anniversary. It was our 10th anniversary last month, since we started working together. Because
happy birthday.
My background is psychology. So for 6 years, so first I have a master's in clinical psychology from a Portuguese university, one of the best recognized ones here in the country. And after I finished my master's, I was invited by one of the teachers there to manage the psychology lab, to do the day-to-day operations in that psychology lab. And I did a little bit of everything: data analysis, setting up research, recruiting participants, all of that. And it was during that time that I had an idea of something that I wanted to build. So this product thing is in me for a long time. And essentially, it was a way to try to solve the challenge of recruiting participants in that particular case for academic studies. So I wanted to build this, and I decided I'm going to leave ISPA, which is my university. I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to join an agency with developers, and I'm going to persuade one of those developers to leave the agency and join me in building this. Ended up, it didn't happen. The agency was Kwame's agency, impossible. But I became a product manager in that role. And one of the things that all product managers struggle with is risk reduction. So how can I reduce the risk of the decisions that I'm taking? And essentially that's what ended up bringing both me and Kwame building this. I think it's really about how can I have more confidence in my calls. And Kwame, you having built, I don't know how many products and companies throughout your career, I imagine you kind of felt this also.
Exactly. So we gave up. I gave up the agency to really focus on this. And it was a little more than a couple of years ago, and 2 years ago, we started noticing a few academic papers really surfacing the synthetic to organic parity, talking about how these large language models were starting to or had the capability to embody people from a multidimensional perspective, not only moral, but other dimensions that other facets that we have as humans, and the parity was already very high, and so we looked at each other and we went, hey, if this is the starting point, and mind you, this was at a time when everyone, I think most people that were dealing with LLMs were creating a solution that was looking for problems to solve, right? And we looked at each other and we said, look, our biggest problem, having created so many products for so many corporations and all over the world, was always that research was extremely slow, that recruiting was painful. Sitting down with people is always amazing. The insight you derive from that experience is amazing, and we're in no way against that at all. But would there be a way to accelerate that process? And so, we started that journey. We launched about a year ago, almost a year ago to this date. It's been an amazing journey. Some of you, I can't really see you, but I imagine if you're listening to this, have been part of that journey, and so really appreciate that. I think I was trying to rush things towards the demo. I don't know why. Maybe before we go to the demo, Hugo, do you want to talk a little bit about the architecture? One of the questions we get a lot is, how are you different from me typing a prompt into GPT, right? We get that a lot, and so I think it's important to kind of dispel, and what have we been working on for a couple of years, right? I think I'm going to put that on stage here. You can see this screen. This is a highly simplified version. You can go to our science and tutorials corner in our website, and we put up a little post with a lot more information earlier today. It's basically divided into three. It's an architecture that's divided into three levels, so to speak. The foundation model, we found that OpenAI's has been amazing. It's still best in class. Even the others admit it. But from a I guess from a business perspective, we need to be agnostic, right? So it's not just that we connect with OpenAI, we're able to connect with other models depending on, I have clients that want stuff the model on premise. So the flexibility here is important. And we're also noticing from an industry perspective that the models, yes, they have different personalities. Claude, apparently, the latest version, a version of, or incarnation of I like that word, of Claude is apparently very human or humane. So they all have their little quirks, things that they're better at than others, and it's our job to leverage that for you guys, right? And then above that, we have a RAG layer that we're now working on actually making this public, and the idea here is how do we really add more and better context to what you're doing to the tasks at hand, right? Because the foundation models, they are by definition very wide, and we need to start narrowing it down so you get the best possible interviews, and you do that by fine-tuning the model, right? So Hugo, what do we have kind of planned on this front?
Just to give a little bit of context, that question, so how are you different from ChatGPT, is probably like number two on the ones I get asked. And sometimes I'm a little bit more tired, and I just say, hey, go try doing this with ChatGPT, because one of the things that what we're trying to do with our product is to exactly overcome some of the limitations that an interface and that a system like ChatGPT, which is a generic system, that is a general purpose system, not particularly designed for generating synthetic users or for doing any particular task. It's supposed to be a lot broader than that. And because of that, one of the challenges that you have when you use systems like those is that it's a criticism that sometimes I get reading posts about synthetic users, but then I go and go see in detail, and they didn't do synthetic users as our product. What they did is they went to ChatGPT and say, hey, pretend you're a young college-educated male that is planning to buy a car. So what cars are you considering? And then the feedback you get from ChatGPT is quite generic, because it doesn't promote diversity in terms of the synthetic users it generates, which is something that we strive to do to a really, really amazing amount of effort. We try to generate synthetic users which are within the user groups that you asked us, or the targets or the audience that you asked us to generate, but diverse within that audience, because it's only from that diversity that we can explore the problem space or even the solution feedback space in a way that it's meaningful and is actionable to build the products you need to build. So right now we have been experimenting with a couple of partners with RAG. RAG essentially stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, which means that before we go and ask a question to the model or ask the model to perform a task, we enrich the context, the prompt, let's call it that. Sometimes it's not what we use sometimes embeddings directly, but we enrich the prompt with context that is relevant for that particular task or for that particular answer, which gives a lot more than what you would get on something like ChatGPT. The multi-agent architecture, I don't want to touch it too much right now, because I'm going to do a demo, and I'm going to do almost an historical demo, which is I'm going to demo the initial interviews we launched, and then the other types of interviews we launched. So I want to keep the multi-agent architecture for that one. So I think we can now go for the demo. So I'm like you, Kwame. I think the product should speak for itself, and that's what we're about to do. So where's the sharing? To present, share screen. Here it is, and here we are. So let's do this. How can this one? Okay. So some of you might already interacted with the app and already recognize this interface, but I imagine most people here today maybe haven't. And to give you just a high-level overview of how it's structured, here at the top is where you can select the type of interviews you want to run. When we launched with only two types of interviews. It was this solution feedback and problem exploration. Problem exploration is essentially a predefined script that runs exactly the same questions independent of the inputs you put on the lower side of the screen. And it's essentially what the type of interview you do when you really want to understand how a particular group of users feels a particular problem. So imagine that young parents of young kids, what are the challenges they have when the kids first go to school? So you would kind of include here in the audience the parents of young kids. On the problems, you would put having trouble getting the kid to school, and then we run a couple of interviews on that side. Then we have the solution feedback. So this one goes a little bit more to the later stages of the discovery and kind of to getting into the define process, which is essentially, I have a group of people that have this particular problem, and I think this solution might help them. This one is something that we really want to make sure that you get feedback that is actionable, that it's not just, oh, your idea is amazing. That's not at all what we want at Synthetic Users. We don't want to validate stuff that shouldn't be validated. We strive, and that's one of the concerns with ChatGPT. And that's what I tell people a lot, which is you go to ChatGPT and you ask him, hey, what do you think about dog foods that you can also feed your baby? And ChatGPT thinks, oh, that could be an amazing idea. On the other side, maybe the taste is not that good, but it's unactionable, generic, and sometimes he even says that this really bad idea should be built. And that's not what we want. And that's the one I'm going to demo today. So I have a couple of audiences here. Adding an audience is as simple as clicking add. Oh, we're on top of the screen. Let me just switch. So it's as easy as clicking add and writing whoever you want to understand better. Let's go with people who are trying to quit smoking, for example. And then you add the problems here on the right. So I'm going to select this audience, but since I just came up with this example, I'm going to use something that we have on our product to help me kind of have an idea of possible problems and decide on which one I want to explore. So I use this magic wand here and I click infer problems, and I'm going to get 5 problems that people who are trying to quit smoke might have. Nicotine withdrawal symptoms, behavioral habits and triggers, social pressure and environment, weight gain concerns, and managing stress without cigarettes. And I'm going to select the weight gain concerns, and I'm going to run a problem exploration interview. I'm going to run just 3, just for the sake of time. And you're going to see what we do now. So the first big difference that we have from generic products like ChatGPT is that we really put a huge effort in creating realistic and well-defined synthetic users. And you're going to see what I mean by this. So all the synthetic users you generate on our platform have 4 characteristics. All of them have a name, an age, a location, and a profession. So any synthetic user always has this. But for each user group that you want to study, we also generate what we call dynamic parameters. So we generate, as you can see here, parameters that might be relevant for segmenting and for injecting diversity that is relevant on this kind of user group. You're going to see here that we have the motivation for quitting, previous attempts to quit, preferred method for quitting, the level of nicotine dependence, and how much of a support system do they have available. So we already have some inputs here, but if you want, and if you want to go for all of them need to be about their children, you can easily edit these parameters and put them all in the same. Also, if you want to add any different any extra parameter that is relevant for this context, you can also add it here by writing on this one. So after I'm done with deciding on which synthetic users I want to keep and which ones I want to change, I just need to click Run Interview. And as I mentioned before, these interviews are pre-scripted, always the same questions with all synthetic users. We start on this one with kind of a background or the synthetic users, so the description of the synthetic users themselves. Then we ask them to describe the problems in their own words. We then move into a recent experience of the problem. When we're doing research, we know that this can be a really insightful type of question because the particular instances of an experience, of a problem, of a way to try to solve them can be really insightful in terms of understanding underlying motivation. So we also ask that to the synthetic users. Then the emotional impact of the product, of the problem and trying to solve it. And finally, no. And then how important is it for this user group to find a solution for the problems? As I mentioned before, we want to make sure that when we're providing feedback, this is an important question that people take into account, because the synthetic users might just say that it's not a big problem and I've been dealing with it quite fine. Then we ask, what are the strategies they've been using until now? We know that from research, this is a really helpful question to understand what are the friction points, what are the pains of the approaches people have been taking, and how can I use that information to build something that achieves a better result for them? And then what are the challenges with that approach? Exactly as a segue for what I just mentioned. Then we ask about what additional challenges related to this problem space they might have. And lastly, if they had a magic wand, what would be their magic solution to solve this problem? As you can see, this interview is almost about to finish. Let's see where the other ones are. So this one all finished already, and this one also finished. So about to finish. As you can see each interview on its own, but so what we sometimes do when we're doing real research is we want to look at particular parts of the problem space that we want to see them together. You can switch to a view by topic. So instead of viewing each interview on its own, you view each question with all the answers together. So it's easier for you to go and check in blocks all of those questions. At the end, what can you do? You can do one of two things. You can one of three things. You can either dive deep immediately into the interviews and read them all and see what are the nuggets that you can find that can inform your thought process. We're soon going to be launching also annotations. You're going to be able to highlight and extract the particular pieces that you like the most, or you can ask follow-up questions. So each of the synthetic users, you can ask follow-up questions. You can ask, I haven't read the interview, so it's kind of hard for me, but I'm going to ask just a quick one. Does your family have an history of smoking? Which might be relevant here. And you can see that the synthetic user starts answering this question immediately. In this case, his parents were both smokers. So you can do these two things. But lastly, sometimes we don't want to go directly. Dona Teresa, agora não posso. Sometimes we don't want to go directly into the interviews, and we just want to have a high-level overview of what was said during those interviews, and that's why we have this create report. So essentially, this report consists in summarizing the main topics of these interviews in a way that it's a lot more faster to digest and for you to have a high-level perspective of what was said during the interviews. So this is kind of the initial interviews.
Hugo, I'd just like to jump in with a little bit of insight from the relationship we have with our users, with some of you guys. Whenever we hear the criticism, oh, but you know the interviews, I actually put a slide up. You know, what do you do when you feel your synthetic users are being too generalist, right? that's exactly what you need to do. You need to ask more questions, and you have a real unfair advantage with regards to organic interviews, which is those users are there for you. They're not going to go to sleep. They're not going to go away. You don't pay them and they disappear. You can ask them loads of follow-up questions and go deeper, right? So don't expect that you're going to get 100% of the insight that you're looking for from that first pass, especially if it's not if it's a predefined interview like the one that Hugo just went through. We have other types of interviews that Hugo will explain. Go deeper, right? And as you go deeper, you will find that there's a lot more there. Okay. So it's just I just wanted to flag that because I think it's really important. It's an advantage that you have over organic interviews. Hugo, do you want to continue with the report?
Yes, I just want to quickly answer one question that we got from someone who's attending our webinar, which is, what is this five-factor Pentagon model? So this is essentially the most well-validated personality framework that exists in cognitive science. So it's the Big Five, or OCEAN model. OCEAN stands for openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And why do we include this on our product? So as I mentioned before, one of the things that we're trying to make our products good at is to inject diversity. So capture the diversity that exists out there in the real world, and don't just have kind of cardboard personas that don't really represent any particular point of views. And one of the things that we know from research and from also our own experience is how much personality can affect the way we deal with situations and the way we will look at the world. And that's what we do here. So for each synthetic users, we also give them this personality, which essentially is a way for them to have particular views of the world in a way that if we hadn't included this, they would kind of default to the average human. And we know that the world is not made of average humans. There's an average human, which is kind of the default if we were to average everyone, but each one of us has our own personality and our own way to look at the world. And we do this exactly for this to also be reflected in the interviews. You'll see sometimes in some answers that since I'm slightly more on the conscientious side, I tend to go by obey rules quite well, and I'm quite structured in the way that I manage my life. So you see the personality being reflected in the interviews themselves. Sometimes in more subtle ways, but sometimes also in quite explicit ways. Going back to I hope it was clear. If not, let me know. Going back to the insights. So each of our reports starts with kind of an executive summary, and then it has 4 sections with the main topics and with the top insights from from all the interviews. And then we have 2 last sections. So one is a surprising insight. So what was kind of the most surprising insight from these interviews? And in this case, it was a significant emotional and psychological benefit derived from small victories, which might be something that is worth exploring when building a product to help smokers quit smoking. And then a suggested follow-up question, kind of a suggested research path for us to follow if we want to. Okay, so this is kind of the ones we started with. They're quite good, but I'm so much more proud of the new ones that we have right now. To give you an example of what the other ones do. So the second type of interview we launched was the custom interview. And we launched this because we had to. There were so many people asking me, hey, can I use my own interview questions? I already have my script. My goal with synthetic users is neither problem exploration or solution feedback. I want to test how a particular messaging approach could work with the users. So we needed to give flexibility to people. And essentially, that's what custom interviews are. Nothing more than allowing you to import your own interview script And in this case, I pre-wrote. So this one was already here. I put it here before, but it's a 5-question script trying to explore what are the decision criteria and how college, about to be college students, make decisions regarding their choices. So I'm going to switch here to senior students in Europe who are about to go to college, selecting custom interview, and again, going to generate 3 synthetic users. You're going to see now that those dynamic params that for smokers were kind of how long have they been trying to quit smoking, what methods have they used. They're not going to be the same here, of course, because we're talking, in this case, it's college students, senior students, high school students deciding on where to go for college. So we have here Leona from Denmark, Matteo Rossi from Italy, Eva Anderson from Sweden. They're all students, and they have different fields of study that they want to study, different future academic aspirations, different extracurricular involvement. Again, we make our best effort to inject diversity into this, into the users that we generate, because that increases a lot the coverage area that we can then get with the interviews. So I'm going to click Run Interviews, and as I mentioned, right, what we're doing here is just taking the questions that you provided. In this case, it was me, of course, and running them with the synthetic users. You're going to see that the questions are exactly the same for all of them, but you can ask any question that you want to the synthetic users. So I have another question here that I'm going to leave, Caleb. I'm going to leave it for the end. I'm going to show it, but I'm going to let everyone know that we're going to leave this for the end because it's a topic that we have towards the end of our session that we're going to touch. Let me just hide it. So as you can see, interviews, I'm going to, on the third one here, I'm about to finish. So here you have them running again. And again, if I waited for them to finish and I click generate report, we would get again that 8 parts report, executive summary, the 5 main areas that were surfaced in the interviews with their particular insights, and then the most surprising insight and a suggested follow-up research question. I'm not going to let this one finish, so I'm going to move into what I feel is kind of the best thing we have right now. I use synthetic users to build synthetic users. So, and this is the one that now I use for almost everything, which is the dynamic interviews. So what are dynamic interviews? Dynamic interviews is our first go at the idea of having agents doing tasks within our product. And what do I mean by agents? An agent in this sense here is essentially a persona generated by a large language model that has a particular goal and has the autonomy to achieve that goal. So on this type of interview, we not only generate the synthetic users, we also generate a synthetic researcher that takes our goal and will run the interview autonomously, deciding on which questions to ask, deciding on to probe on an answer or to move to a new topic. So with full autonomy to explore the problem space. And that's what I'm about to show you now. So what I have here is quite similar to the interview I just ran. So, but in the case before, the research goal in general is the same, is to understand how about to be college students make a decision regarding their college, what do they use to decide and what not, and what criteria do they ask for help from anyone. So that was the goal for both. But the other one that I just showed you, predefined questions, always the same. So if the synthetic user answers something that might be interesting doing a follow-up, there's no follow-up because it's always the questions in sequence. On this one, they can do follow-up and they can take into account the information of the synthetic users to frame the questions in a more meaningful way. Let me show. So I have here, I want to learn how their decision process about this topic is, how they pick a college, what kind of criteria, what kind of research they do before they make a decision, and if they consult anyone. I'm being quite prescriptive here in terms of research goals, so I'm gonna remove some parts. I'm going to just leave it here. And why am I doing this? Because I'm giving more flexibility to the research agent to go and probe different aspects depending on how the interview is going. And I have senior students in Europe who are about to go to college. And here I have senior students in the US who are about to go to college. So what I'm about to demo now, I'm going to just move this here. What I'm about to demo now is something that I haven't mentioned yet, which is not only the dynamic interviews, but the capability of running what we call a comparison study. So what we're going to be doing for each group is generating synthetic users and synthetic researchers, running sets of interviews in parallel, and then have a summarization report that compares the outcomes of both interviews. So let me run this now. This one I'm going to run with a little bit more, 5 on each side. Again, synthetic users being generated. You're going to see now that you're going to have 2 tabs, so one for each type of audience. You can see them here at the top. It's going to take a little bit more because we're generating more synthetic users and 2 groups of them. But as soon as it's finished, you're going to be able to see that we have 2 tabs and the same dynamic parameters for both groups to make sure that there's no diversity that we don't want there because it was injected by having different types of different parameters. But you're going to see that senior students who are about to go to college and senior US students who are about to go to college. And now I just need to click run interviews. And you're going to see that they're going to start running in a moment. You're going to see here that we also have 2 tabs. So interviews 1 is for the European students and interviews 2 is for the US students. And they're all, the research goal is the same for each of the researchers. Let's go through the first question on one of the US students. So the researcher decided to ask, Elijah, could you share with me how you began your journey of choosing a college, particularly what were the very first steps you took or the initial factors you consider? So we get the answer from Elijah, and then we get, because he's going for exactly agriculture, and then the synthetic researcher takes into account this information, that is the preference for this synthetic user, and explores it with a new question. And he goes on and on until he reaches the 6 questions he's allowed to ask. And you will see that all interviews are quite diverse. It's no longer about always the same questions, nothing like that. It's about exploring all the diversity that exists in this space with the autonomy of an agent that can make sensible decisions and can ask really probing questions and neutral, non-biased, and non-leading questions. It's amazing when you read these interviews, it's amazing how well they perform. We know that there are some products out there right now that do this synthetic researcher approach with real participants, with humans. We thought that this makes even more sense with synthetic users. When these interviews are all finished, let me check. We're on the 6th one here, so we shouldn't be long from finishing. When they're all finished, I'm going to click report, and you're going to see the structure of our report. So it's essentially, the report is structured on the comparison interviews and the comparison studies to show the main topics that surfaced in the interviews and to show what were the commonalities in terms of answers from both groups, but also what was particular to group 1 and what was particular for group 2 for each of the main topics, of the 5 main topics that surfaced during the interviews. Okay, so they're all finished, and I'm going to click create report. This report is a little bit slow because the amount of text that is being processed right now is quite large, so it takes a little bit more time. Okay, so there's someone answering to Collab. Cool. So as you can see, executive summary This report synthesizes the insights from interviews with senior students in the US and Europe who are about to enter college. Commonalities. Students emphasize the importance of program quality, hands-on learning opportunities, and financial considerations. In the US, they showed a strong preference for colleges offering extensive real-world experience through internships and projects, and the European ones highlighted more the significance of international exposure and language programs. The decision key factors, we have here, both of them, financial aid availability and practical experience, also a bit of a factor. But then on the US, proximity to home and availability to specific extracurricular activities and college reputation. And in Europe, international exposure and opportunities for study abroad programs significantly, and colleges with a vibrant multicultural campus environment. So as you can see, for each one of the main topics like this one and this one, we get the commonalities, but also the differences and the particular aspects that are more relevant for each of the groups. So in high level terms, this is how, as you can see, this is what I tell people. It's like, oh, can I do this in ChatGPT? Go and try getting a report as detailed and as good as this one from ChatGPT. You're going to spend a lot more time than I'm not even sure if you can do this on ChatGPT. In general terms, this is how our product works. A couple of last final features I want to show you. So you can bookmark studies. You can export them in several file formats. You can also share them with anyone you want by just clicking the link. And every study that you've run in our platform will always be available on your workspace here on the history. And lastly, if you want to collaborate with anyone on the platform, you can also do that by inviting them to your workspace and sharing the research you've done with them. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Hugo. I think it would be, in order to maybe touch on what Caleb was asking around quantitative, what we are, so we really, our mission for this first year was really, how do we get the best possible interviews, right? I'm not even going to qualify them as synthetic, or the best possible interviews. And we do so with a lot of engineering, as Hugo was mentioning, but also very regularly we are comparing them with organic interviews, right? And there are a couple of posts already up on our science and tutorials and in our journal on our website. You can see how we do that. If you have more questions around that, I'm very happy to answer. But that's really the core of what we're doing right now. How can we get the best possible interviews? In order to do so, the RAG, so retrieval augmentation, needs to come into play, because we know that through our experiments, it's the best way to take us to the next step in terms of synthetic organic parity. But a lot of you, and we know that a lot of our customers are, when do you have surveys ready? And we are working on it. We still don't have a date, but it's as you can see, that's the order of things right now. So the RAG, to ensure the interviews are even better. And then not next, because a lot of these are being worked in parallel. Surveys. Surveys have what we really want to give you guys is the possibility for you to go from qual to quant in the same environment, right? Which is something that you don't usually get. So you do the qualitative interviews, you know that there is a saturation point, and we in our science corner, we talked about how we start to measure that saturation point. After a certain number of interviews, you're not going to get any more insights, so you've covered all bases. But how do you go from that to then a quantitative reality, where it's really more about give me between these two pieces of content, which one would this audience of 1,000 participants from three Bible Belt states, for example, which one would they prefer, and give it to me in raw numbers. So that's more. There's a different type of architecture that we're creating for that, but it's definitely on the way, and we've been obviously trying it out. You can hack it, and there's one. Caleb's question was responded by another fellow user. You can definitely hack it. So you can ask a very straightforward question from 1 to 5, from 1 to 10. Give me a number, and you will get those numbers. But from an architectural perspective, they're not yet fully validated, and that's what we want. Just like we're striving for an organic to synthetic parity in the high 90s. That's our goal. We need to provide you guys with exactly the same type of parity on the survey side. Otherwise, it's just some random numbers, and they will be of no value to you. So that's the surveys that's coming up next, and then vision. We've been playing around with vision for a long time now. There's a number of models there. Even Salesforce has a vision model. None of them are at the level where we feel comfortable in actually, productizing it within our environment. I think they're not far. We know that, but it also hasn't been a priority, because when we're doing qualitative, when you are doing qualitative, you can actually describe what is it that you're trying to test fairly accurately using text, and the amount of insight you get out of that experience has been super positive. So yes, we're definitely going to allow you to put pictures and videos and sounds in there as multimodality becomes more of a thing within foundation models. But for the time being, we're not yet comfortable.
Yes,
Hugo.
So I put a comment from Keith here on the screen, because it's exactly what we mean by the public RAG. So right now we already do this with a couple of partners, in which we are ingesting some of the data they already have. In some cases, it's customer support data. In the other case, is some surveys and some transcripts that they run with real users, with humans that they had run before. And it's essentially, we use that to generate both on two steps. One is to generate the synthetic users with even more fidelity in what the real world situation is. And the other one is, when doing the interviews themselves, also incorporating context to make those interviews even more grounded. So essentially, that's what I normally do when I'm talking to people here in the office, and they ask me for this, is I go take this Post-it, which is the import external sources, to show them that we already are working actively on this. Regarding two other points that you mentioned, Keith, and I think are relevant. So one is this one. We need to do a better job at this. It's something that we've been discussing internally for quite some time. Is we need to help the champions of our product within companies to better explain how it works, explain what it does, explain the advantages of that. And we are working, Kwame and I have been working on this, mostly Kwame. I do little here in the company. Kwame does most things. Kwame has been investing a lot on this, on creating content and creating benchmarks that you can use to show how well the product works, and that's coming in the next couple of months. To your last point, we can show that the inside synthetic users are similar or better than traditional results. So until we have kind of the tool that allows you to import transcripts and compare them with interviews on synthetic users, which is kind of our goal, is an evaluation framework full-fledged. That's what I tell people to do, is if you've run recently some research that you got some insights out of this, and you have either the transcripts or the report, something that was learned from that research. And it's not something obvious. It's not kind of, oh yes, everyone wants cheaper stuff. Run an equivalent study on synthetic users and compare it with your own eyes, because we can put out there as many case studies as we want. We can do all of that, but there's nothing like seeing it with your own eyes, with your own examples. And because of the product allows for such a breadth of types of research you can do. There's not enough case studies in the world to cover all those use cases. So what we tell people is run some dynamic interviews with the same research goal, and then compare what you get on the interviews with the ones you run with real people, or run it with a personal example. One of when I'm testing new models, new prompts, new architectures, I use my own personal example of being a shared custody parent. It has its own challenges and its own nuances, and I generate shared custody parents from Portugal, from my neighborhood, and I ask them questions to see how well it resonates with my own personal experience. And that's essentially the two ways, until we have more formalized framework for evaluating the comparisons. That's the two ways I suggest people to do right now.
But they're very valid points, and we will continue to try and meet those, really help you guys out when it comes down to convincing your peers and your leadership. Yeah, we need to do a better job at that. Just to add to what Hugo has mentioned, if you go, let me just put it over here, slides, share my screen, entire screen, yeah. If you go to our website, and in science and tutorials, you already have over here how we actually do the comparison, right? So we run, the look back, do all the transcripts. We then need to summarize the transcripts using kind of an LDA kind of approach, but using our internal engine to do this. We identify the common themes, create the code book. You know how this works. And then once you have the code book on one side, you run the same interviews using custom interview in this case, with synthetic users, and suddenly you have organic on one side, synthetic on the other. You put them together, and you start creating a little table of the overlaps between those two, and then there's a parity score, or a framework for a parity score for, in this case, for this particular study this is fairly recent. We ran this last month. So we're running a new one this month. So yeah, as you can tell, we have, let me see, stop sharing. We have, yeah, it's something we're constantly doing. But then obviously you've got some customers who kind of go, oh, well, that's not independent, is it? Well, okay, so yeah, let's get an independent company to do this. Would that help? But let me try it ourselves, and then they try it ourselves. Sometimes we get like transcripts from the customers themselves, and we do the comparison, and we look, give them a number, and they're like, okay, we're happy now. But yeah, this is it's going to be an ongoing process, and yeah, I think we're on the right track, but it does take a little time.
So I have one question here. I'm going to put it on the screen. Hi, Melzer. Long time no see, my friend. Happy that you joined. So Melzer is asking us, what range of personas are covered by our tool? I don't have an answer, because there's a couple of examples that I wasn't able to run meaningful interviews. One of them was kind of really edgy stuff. What I can say is that you can, depending on the type of input you use, you can run any type of persona. You can run more behavioral personas. You can run more demographic-oriented personas. You can go for more jobs to be done approach. It's up to you to control and leverage the tool. Again, this is a tool, and like any other tool, there's some level of expertise. We hope that the learning curve is not too steep, but there's some learning and there's some iteration in learning how to best use it. So, but there's kind of a huge coverage in terms of tools. One caveat that I need to say is I don't expect the tool to perform as well if you're trying to understand farmers in Botswana. It's just by the nature of the training corpus that was used in this, which is essentially the entire internet. I was commenting with a friend of mine that it takes 20,000 years for a single person to read all the text that was included in the training data of these models. So it's a huge amount of data. But the smaller the footprint that a particular population or user group has on that data, the harder it is to get good results. So farmers in Botswana might not be the best personas that to use on the product. Having said this, we're quite happy with the coverage that we get. And taking one comment here from Keith. I think it's an important thing to mention because it was a conversation that me and Kwame had to have around mid last year, which is when we look at these interviews, we can think of them in two different axes. One is form, is how close are they to the way humans speak in a user interview, and the other one is content, which is do they mention the same things an equivalent person would mention in that context. And this why we had to have this conversation last year was we were looking at our interviews and some people were commenting on it, and we were like, this is not exactly how humans do user interviews. No one speaks in such a fluent and organized way. And we even considered kind of, hey, do we need to kind of dumb them down and make them more real and have more pauses and all of that? And by at the end of our big discussion, we ended up deciding not to do it. Because what we feel brings value to our customers is the fact that they mention the same things. So the content itself is the same you would get from a human interview, but not necessarily all the pauses and lack of fluidity in terms of structure. So we've been focusing more on getting the content to be the same that you would get from a real person, and not as much that the way they speak is exactly the same. Also, it's really about speed of iteration. With synthetic users, you can run 5 different angles on a particular problem that you want to understand in a couple of minutes, and doing that with humans would be something that would take probably weeks. So it's really about the unlock of speed that we provide. So we have 2 more minutes. Not sure if there are any other questions. Let me do something. Let me create quickly a coupon for people who attended this to give you a 30% discount for the first 6 months. So coupon. So the coupon will be synthetic LinkedIn. I think it's a good one. And if there, Kwame, any final thoughts?
No, this was good.
No.
Thank you so much for participating. Yeah, we will start doing more of these as we roll out more features and as the platform grows with your input. So we're really doing this with you guys. So thank you so much, and yeah, see you later.
Don't turn off yet. Let me just put the coupon here on the comment. Duration 6 months and create. And there we go. Let me just connect LinkedIn. Okay. So thank you all for attending. It's my first webinar. I maybe messed it up a bit, but I'm really happy that you joined, and I hope we can. Where will the coupon be? I'm going to share it here on the comments, Keith. Let me just try to find the event on LinkedIn. Okay, here I am, about to post it, but it's essentially synthetic LinkedIn.
All right.
So yeah.
Have a good one. Bye.
Have a good one.